Steve from Baracho, and you're watching Heavy Galaxy Show. Rock on, man.
My vision's clear, the mission's learned. Get in that car, won't you take that ride? I ain't got time to say goodbye. Won't you come and get me? Catch me if you can. Ain't gonna give up, sticking with the plan.
All right, the Heavy Galaxy Show. We're back with another episode this week for you guys and gals. And today we got a really cool one for you folks, as I'd like to welcome to the show a gentleman who, for over 40 years, he's been grinding that axe in the hard and heavy rock world. You know him as the guitarist for one of the godfathers of stoner rock, the Mighty Monster Magnet. And he's here today to talk about his debut solo record, Caivano. It's available now for purchase. I'd like to welcome Mr. Phil Caivano to the Heavy Galaxy Show. What's up, Phil? Thanks for coming on with me today. How are you, man?
Thanks for having me, man. Pleasure to be here.
Absolutely, man. Well, Phil, let's get right into it, man. Caivano, it's your first solo release, and as I mentioned, it's out now. Everyone can go have a listen and purchase the record. And Phil, man, like we're seeing a lot of these days with a lot of veteran musicians. You know, obviously this record was put together during the pandemic when artists like yourself had the time to finally do some things that you normally don't have to do. And I mean, quite an impressive debut, man. So I guess let's walk us through, putting this record together. Now, was this something that you decided to get rolling during the pandemic, or did you have these songs sort of in the vault for a while before you did it?
I had a couple in the vault. I had a couple just like sitting in the background. I wouldn't say it was a work in progress, but little things I was like picking away at, some songs there was a song or two that I wrote with my friend Todd Youth when we did this Capricorn thing together. And Todd was out in New York, out here in Jersey with me. We were doing this Motorhead tribute thing after Lemmy had passed away, and our love for Motorhead, that was really like the Capricorn thing, and then Todd was encouraging me to keep it going. And then, he unfortunately passed away. And then one thing was leading to another. And then I was getting busy with Magnet. Things were on the back burner. And I never really thought about it as like a a side project. I didn't really ever want to do a side band, I've always been really, really happy working with Wyndorf, it's always been great. Keeps me musically satisfied and get my creative stuff like happening, and then you're right with the downtime. And I was working with this other drummer, my buddy Paulie Kane. We were working on some songs together, just going through some things, and there was some talk about me doing a record finally. And Magnet got busy again, and I kind of didn't really think about it that much. And then with the downtime, I listened to a couple of the tracks. I'm like, these are pretty good. I'd like to get them out somehow, and then that first year I kept writing few more things, Magnet had just done the Better Dystopia record. And, I was like listening to a lot of old stuff again. And, like I said, music has always been like an outlet for me to not think about what's going on. I've always been that kind of musician, never like, I don't think what I have to say is so important it's going to change the world. Like, I've never gone down that road. It's more like escapism, An escapism for me. And so I started doing it again, and I had this little nucleus, and I played it for Bob Pentella. And we were like, let's just finish it, and see where it goes. And that's what we did.
Yeah, very cool. Well, you brought up the band Motorhead, and so in terms of the musical style on the record, I mean, obviously those influences are in there a lot. I mean, in terms of really, I mean, if I could, explain the sound to anybody if they haven't heard it yet, I would just say it's really, putting Monster Magnet and Motorhead into a blender and going from there. It doesn't stray really too far from what you're known for. Because a lot of times we see, when a lot of veteran musicians want to do a solo record, they sort of venture into, genres and subgenres that they're really influenced by, but that, obviously they normally don't play with their, main band or so. But really on this record, you kind of kept it close to the vest. I mean, you didn't really veer too far off. I mean, you've got obviously a lot of influences. You've been in a lot of different, projects and bands that have different sounds, whether it be hardcore or like, the Blitzspeer stuff that we'll get to in a little while. So, now, did you consciously, make the decision? Like you said, I mean, you were just kind of explaining, obviously, that you had some of these in the vault little by little, but did you make the decision really when you put the album out to really maybe not venture off too far from, what people know you for? Or was this just a natural
It was,
sort of
it's
thing?
more natural because it's like, that's who I am. I mean, that's what I am. I don't try to get too far. I've never really gone too far away from it. Like, look, I love doing different stuff. I love when Wyndorf throws some stuff at me that's like out of my wheelhouse and stuff. But like, when it came down to doing my own stuff, let's just face it, I'm the guitar player for Monster Magnet for 25 years. That's like what I do. And it doesn't, even my style in Monster, it's always been like, I play guitar how I play guitar. I'm not one of these guys to be like, oh, if you ask Phil to play on a record or play on something, I'm going to do what I do. I'm not going to all of a sudden do something completely different. To be honest with you, there was one track that like, I was like, let me try something different and do a different sound and clean it up or whatever and make it more something. And I worked on it and I went out and I came back and I was like, that sounds fucking terrible. Who the fuck do I think I am? Like all is like, I'm not into Cure, and I love, I love Robert Smith and I love all kinds of different music, but I'm like, what am I doing with all that, crap? And I was just like, plug in the Les Paul, turn up the Marshall, let her go, so it's just kind of like, and it became that personal influence kind of thing to me. It's like, I kind of went back a little bit to my roots that got me going in the first place of the things I love. Let it be a little sloppy. Let it be a little raw. Let it be fuzzed out. Let it have a lot of distortion. Let it breathe a little bit. It's like, it's really who I am. And that came down to like, what am I going to call this thing? Like all that kind of stuff. And in the industry, people always call me by my last name. And I was like, when I put this thing out, I could call it, manhole cover, and like people are going to be like, well, it's Phil Caivano from Monster Magnet. So I just decided, like, let's just eliminate all that. And I'll just use my last name and call it a day. I didn't really think too much about that stuff.
Sure. Yeah, no, it makes sense, man. No, definitely. Now, with lyrically in the song titles, when I see the titles, some of them, Now is Forever, You'll Wait, Verge of Yesterday. I mean, these are just some of the song names. Lyrically, now, were these tracks influenced by what you were going through during the pandemic? Or was this maybe a way to release what you were going through and feeling at the time? Or were these just same thing? Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. And like, lyrically, again, like I've never been one to just like, be all like, always like a play on words and things like that. And like, there's always gonna be some personal stuff in there, of course. And I've never been like, I haven't written lyrics, honestly, in a really long time, since like really the Blitzspeer days, you know what I mean? And I haven't been in front of a microphone singing lead vocals since that time. And back then, Scotty and I would be like, oh, like we were young and we were like silly and like, we were like, come up with a one-liner. And the lyrics were always like a group of one-liners. What does it mean? It means nothing. You know what I mean? So part of it was that. Part of it was like, I tried not to tap too far into what was going on and around everybody during the pandemic, and try to, again, escapism, try to escape from it all a little bit, like the song Now is Forever was just like, something I wrote quite a while ago that was like, it kind of held true to what was going on, that like, with everything that was going on around, everybody had a different experience during the pandemic, where there's a lot of people had very heavy personal stuff going on. I got, I actually got pretty sick with COVID a couple times. And I was like, hey, man, all I really got is right fucking now, man. Let's just hope I get through this fucking thing. Or like, like right now, right here, right now, I'm okay. So I'm gonna go with it. I ain't in the hospital. I just had to turn it all off. That's part of who I am. I like shutting it out. Living in what's another Wyndorf and I thing. Like we just live in our own little world, man, and it's safe.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Well, and one of the things I'm really glad that that you're doing with the album is that you're putting, it's out on vinyl. Because to me, I think for this, kind of sound you have on this record, this kind of music, it doesn't do it justice any other way than to have this thing on vinyl. And speaking of that, I did come across a picture that I'm going to bring up here in a sec that I saw. I think it was on one of the Monster Magnet group pages. Let me just bring this up real quick. Now, this is obviously you, an original member there of Monster Magnet, Tim Cronin, who, I mean, Tim, I had the pleasure of speaking with Tim last year on another show that I do, man. He's a great guy. What a good dude he is. He sent me a bunch of early, Magnet, memorabilia and stuff. Just a good dude. But he was telling me that this place right here, Jack's Music Shop in Red Bank, New Jersey. It's been around for over 50 years. He said he's been working there for like 30, 35 years, I believe. And to me, I mean, over 50 years, seeing a record store like that still going, surviving the pandemic and everything, I would think having your record in that store, at home in Jersey, that's got to bring such I would think, sentimental value to you that probably trumps it being in any other place I can imagine.
Like, you hit it on the head. I mean, like Jack's, I've been going to Jack's and getting my vinyl there since I was 10 years old.
Wow. Damn.
Where I'm sitting right now in my studio, the original Jack's was 2 doors down on
wow.
the side of the street from where I live right now. Jack's dad and my grandfather were friends. You know what I mean? So there's this long history of Jack's music. I love Jack's. I love Jack Anderson. His dad had a place called Anderson's here in Red Bank that, our families would go get our TV sets and things and shit and stuff. Nice. And there's a lot of history, and there's a lot of history, even more so of like, a lot of my first records were bought at Jack's.
Wow.
And, waiting for the imports to come in. My first Hawkwind record, remember the first time I bought a Budgie record was like, there's this band Budgie, and like, who's Budgie, and like, I was 14 years old, maybe 13 at that time. And a guy, Ronnie, who worked there, going in the back, taking it out of the plastic, because the imports used to come in the plastic bags and not really sealed, like, with the shrink wrap, and like, okay, we can listen to the first track, and if you don't buy it, someone else will. It was like this really, really special time of my life, and very instrumental. Jack's music, very instrumental in my influences of kind of who I became. That was the vinyl shop. And there's a couple other spots we used to travel to find vinyl. Igor's out in Old Bridge, and
Vintage Vinyl too. I used to go there, travel from New York to Vintage Vinyl. I know that closed up a couple of years ago, which was unfortunate. I know that was a great place.
Yeah, and this little pocket of Jersey is really, really interesting as far as musical stuff goes. That's a whole nother thing between like garage rock, metal, all the kind of things that went on, everything that went on out in Old Bridge, but Jack's, not to go too far away from that, like, what a special spot. Tim has been very instrumental. Tim, back, he helped me write some lyrics with the Capricorn stuff that I was doing with Todd. And Tim was like one of the friends who was pushing me to get this record done. He was like, you have to do it. So to have my vinyl in that store is beyond special to me. I can't put it into words.
Yeah, no, that's really cool, man. I mean, like I said, it's you said you've been buying records there since you're 10 years old, so I can imagine, like you said,
forget it.
That sentimental value's got to feel good to you, especially your own. It's one thing if you get a Monster Magnet record, but to have your own solo record, that's a whole other story, Yeah, very cool. Well, Phil, it's not only, obviously now it's been 25 years for the almighty Power Trip record. Obviously, that was Monster Magnet's obviously biggest record commercially, at least to date. And it's obviously, the same year back in '98. Obviously, you joined the same year. right before that came out. And I know a few years back, you guys played a 30th anniversary show in New Jersey for the Spine of God record. Do you have anything maybe up the sleeve to maybe do something for Power Trip for the 25th anniversary? Is there any talks about that in the
Yeah,
works?
there's some talks about that.
Okay.
You know, especially after doing this, we just did the tour of Europe. You know, and we did Power Trip in you know, we did Power Trip right before the pandemic. We like when the pandemic started, when coronavirus started, we were in Europe playing Power Trip.
Mm,
So that's been on hold here.
okay.
We want to do it. We're going to do it.
Hmm.
You
Okay.
know, it's a special record. It's a real special, of course, a real special time in mine and Dave's history and our friendship. You know, that record was. I happened to be in L.A. I was living and starting to work in LA when Dave called me and said, "Hey, I'm going to come to LA to do this record." We didn't know it was Power Trip at the time. But when I was visiting Wyndorf in the studio and hearing these tracks, I was like, "Oh my God, this is a great record." I mean, and it just kind of, I was in the studio a lot with him at the time and the other guys at the time, and really special time, you know, really, really cool.
Yeah. Well, like you just said, I mean, you and Dave, I mean, like I said, it's been 25 years since you joined Monster Mag, but you know, you guys of course go way back before then. I mean, back to the late 70s, obviously, when you're both in the punk band Shrapnel. And I didn't realize until I interviewed him that Shrapnel was Michael Lago's first signing ever to Elektra. I just found out a few years ago. Obviously, Michael being the legendary A&R guy
Yeah.
who, after Shrapnel, signed a little band called Metallica back then. So I mean, yeah, so like I said, you and Dave, man, you guys go way back, like 45 plus years or so. I mean, you don't see that often, you
No.
know, with that sort of relation. Like you said, you guys are obviously great friends. So what is it about working with Dave that really makes you guys just such a natural fit? Not just friends, but really band members, which is really tough to pull off for that long.
You know, I think with the both of us, it's kind of who we are and where we're from. You know, we're from Red Bank, New Jersey, you know, and like I honestly I met Dave in 1975.
Wow.
We're on the way. My friend's brother was driving to see Lou Reed at the Felt Forum, and he goes, "Oh, we got to pick up my friend Dave," and I didn't know who Dave was at the time. And then when Dave got in the car, I was like, "That's that cool dude in Red Bank who, like, you know, I always see him at the record store, you know," and like the visual was there. But then after that, we started hanging around and listening to music together. Our formative years were like we're in the same room, you know, and like I think what keeps us together after all these years, looking at it now, just our influences, and we're still on the same page. You know, you hear a lot of guys in long-term bands that don't stay together, or there's all this conflict or whatever. That like guys wanted to do something else. They didn't like the road that the band was going down. They didn't like this. They didn't like that. Then it's personal. Like we've always kept our friendship in front of everything. I remember when Dave asked me to join the band, we were very, very clear that we've been friends for a long time. No matter what happens with business, no matter what happens with what, we're going to remain friends.
That's really cool. Yeah. Yeah. No, it seems like Dave, I mean, like I said, obviously when I was talking to Tim, same thing. Even when he left the band, he was still working, obviously, for years with Monster Band, you know, behind the scenes. And it just seems like in general, you know, I mean, just with New Jersey, I mean, there's, you know, obviously you've got the bands that are just so tied together. You have Monster Magnet and Atomic Bitchwax and Riot God. I mean, it just seems like you guys really have such a tight, unique community where it's really just you guys all support each other and help each other out. And obviously, you know, proof is in the pudding that going back as far as you guys do, you know, with each other. Like I said, with all you guys, it's a cool little, you know, thing that's hard to, you know, we all see. A lot of us, we've talked about it, you know, a lot of us to the journalists always like, man, Jersey's just such a tight little group there that these guys just really stick together, you know?
Yeah, I think you said the word right there. It's the friendship, and you want to see your friends do good. You want to see your friends be happy, like happy, right? So doing good is relative, right? Like if you're happy, you're doing things like, you know, even like, you know, we're on this tour, you know, hanging out with Dave Woody from Municipal Waste, you know, he was, You know what I mean? Like this,
Yeah.
it's like so intertwined, Rob Leacock, who's done all our work. I can, any given night, I can see that guy walking down the street. You know what I mean? You mentioned Alago. Since the days I met Michael, I mean, I remember being in the front row at Dead Boy shows and seeing
Wow.
this guy. I knew Michael before he worked at Elektra,
Mm-hmm.
a visual, and then
Sure, yeah.
then he worked at the Ritz, and he was booking bands, and one thing led to another, and we were doing the whole punk magazine thing with Lakes McNeil and all that stuff before that. And as Shrapnel evolved, Michael ended up working with us and getting us the record deal. It was like a great learning process. And like Michael is one of my closest friends in my life. He's a dear, dear friend of mine. And and Michael, like, calling me and let's go see this band, let's go see that band. I remember going to see Metallica with Michael at L'Amour's in Brooklyn, when he was like, I love this band, we got to go. Remember him, and I had, like, being out in Jersey, I knew who they were from the whole Old Bridge thing. Do you know what I mean? And so everything kind of like intertwined with certain friendships, and like, I'm not saying I turned Michael on to Metallic, but when we were talking about it, I was like, oh man, I hope Michael does it, because there was other labels after Metallica at the time, and
Sure.
Michael's such a great dude. And Daniel Ray from Shrapnel.
Daniel Ray, that's right.
Going on and doing,
White Zombie and producing and everything, right? Yeah.
Ramones and all that stuff. So, and like, we're all during the pandemic, one of the best days I had was getting together with Dave and Daniel and Michael, and just us dudes knowing each other as long as we have. And, those guys encouraging me to do my record, you know what I mean? And so it's all like, Dave Wyndorf has been very encouraging with my project, and same with Michael and Daniel and all the local cats, Tim and, Bob, and then doing it with Bob. And, like now we have, the last bunch of years, Alec Morton is our bass player playing bass with Magnet. He was in Raging Slab with Bob, and Blitzspeer play all the shows with Raging Slab. It just feels right,
Yeah.
And at this time, at this age, and this time of our careers, and like, bringing up the 25-year thing, like, things just make sense, things just make sense, that's it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Well, you just brought up Blitzspeer, so we'll get into that. I mean, like I said, obviously after Shrapnel disbanded, you didn't stop, okay, and you started Blitzspeer. Very underrated band in my opinion. It came out in 1990, right around that time where there was so much great music coming out of New York and New Jersey at that time. You had all these different subgenres of rock. Obviously you had the noise rock stuff. You had the White Zombie and Helmet and Unsane. I mean, that all came out at that time. Hardcore, obviously, New York hardcore was as big as it ever was at that point. But there was that other scene what Blitzspeer was sort of in, that sort of sleaze rock, / metal type of sound. Like you mentioned, Raging Slab. Raging Slab was, I mean, I thought a lot of people thought they were going to be just humongous.
I thought they should have been like the biggest band in the world at the time.
They should have been bigger than they were. I agree with you on that. I mean, they were just such a different band, such a unique band.
Great.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I mean, Circus of Power was another band that was in that, that arena. Cycle Sluts from Hell. You said it was just that cool little scene that you guys had out there. But you talk a little bit about like those early 90s days in New York City as a musician.
Oh, yeah. And funny enough, I met Scotty from Blitzspeer at the Brighton Bar in Long Branch. He was down playing with there was a guy named Fourway. He had a band called Bad Posture. They were from San Francisco, but they started another band. I forget what they were calling that band at the time, but a local guy said, there's this guy coming down here, this guitar player, you should meet him. And, you guys would hit it off, and Scotty was from Union City, New Jersey, and living in New York. And I was living in New York at the time. And so we got together and started like writing some songs together. At the time, the initial time, I was just like, it was after Shrapnel, and I didn't know what I was doing or what I really wanted to do. And, young and just like, in my 20s, and just like, what am I going to do? And I started hanging out with this dude, and we just started writing songs together. And I took a little bit of a break, was like, I don't know, it's moving kind of fast, and I don't know what I want to do. And he was like, well, I called him a few months later, about 6 months later, and he was like, I got this other bass player, Kurt Fleck, who happened to play in Raging Slap for 10 seconds.
Mhm.
And we started Blitzspeer. And we were that period of time, you're right, was a really interesting time in New York City, because not only did you have hardcore, the heyday of hardcore,
Mhm.
in my opinion,
Oh yeah,
and
absolutely.
like all of that old punk rock stuff led into hardcore. I can't give Roger and Vinny Stigma like
Mm.
enough credit. Like I'm a big, big, big Agnostic Front fan.
Same here. Yeah.
Romag stuff, Murphy's Law, who I played in with a little while,
Mhm.
at Reagan Youth, and all these bands. But then you also had the bands you mentioned, the Unsane, Cop Shoot Cop. You had Lydia Lunch. Then you had the early White Zombie noise stuff. Then you had Sonic Youth. And then, like,
Mhm.
at any given night of the week, you could go out anywhere and
Anywhere.
find something cool to see.
Yep.
It wasn't just a sleaze rock thing with the Circus of Powers and Us Guys and the Slabs and the Cycle Sluts and stuff. You had the Lismar Lounge and you had the Pyramid. Then
Yep.
you had those bands coming in from Seattle playing at the Pyramid, and the first time Nirvana's in town, the first time all the early Soundgarden stuff. Then you had, the Laughing Hyenas, which is one of my favorite bands from Detroit, coming in. I'm like the
Mhm.
biggest John Brannon
John
fanboy.
Brennan.
I
Yeah.
love John. He's a good, become a
Negative
friend.
approach. Yeah. Mhm.
I love I love Easy Action. And then you started, like, that time in New York was very, very special, because when you really look at the punk rock stuff, it only
Mhm.
lasted a couple years. And I always felt like with that whole CBGB's era stuff, the hardcore guys were the ones that kept it going at the
Going.
matinees. Then there
Yep.
was some other stuff too. I guess, the Sonic Youths and the other places to play, and Lydia Lunch and all this stuff, between poetry readings and things to see and do. The Lower East Side was a melting pot. Then you throw on top of it the art that happened
Mhm.
in that time frame. It's ridiculous.
Yeah.
It's just
Yeah.
ridiculous creatively what went on.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And like you said, it's unfortunately, yeah. I like you said, the art part is interesting too. You had all the street art, you had all the, the poster art, that was coming. I mean, you had great artists, the guy who did this right behind me, Puzzhead, I mean, did a lot of those albums, Prong. I mean, he did a bunch of bands. I mean, I think he even did Metallica, I
Yeah,
believe, right? Yeah.
he did some metallic stuff. And Pusshead, I saw him recently. Had a thing in the city, and what an interesting guy! What a great dude! And then you throw in the stuff from the West Coast that was filtering it east. I'll never not acknowledge the West Coast. Like, I'm not one of these guys, oh, New York, New York. There were
Mhm.
pockets of the country that really cool things were going on. You had COC, and then COC from the hardcore days, the punk rock hardcore days evolving into what they evolved into. Then you had the skate culture, and then you had subway culture and skate culture meeting. Pusshead was doing stuff in Thrasher magazine, and, like, I remember somebody say, "Hey, this guy Pusshead wants to talk to you, about your music." And I was like,
Mhm.
"Wow, I know that name from
Mhm.
reading magazines." We all used to read magazines and things, and be out there and postering and wheat pasting and shows, and, like, we felt like we were the king. Like, when Blitzspeer, we felt like we were the kings of the fucking world. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Like, you're out there
Sure.
doing it, hanging out, and, like, you go down to, Avenue A, and, like, everybody in every band was all there hanging out. And it goes back to friendships. A
Mhm.
lot of friendships were developed back then, and people are still in touch. And Stigma and I are really old friends, and
Mm.
Roger, and, like, all these dudes and people, and like, your friends were bartending at different bars, and, very special time in New York City.
Yeah, it was. And for you guys, obviously, Blitzspear, I mean, and this is now, here you are, between Shrapnel and Blitzspear, and you've been playing for a little over a decade, and you've already now been on two major labels, and that itself is obviously, I think, a major feat, just to, I mean, get to that. A lot of people, just to get one deal with a major is one thing, but to be on two bands, two majors, and the majors were all over. I mean, you had RCA and Epic, especially, were really signed a lot of those New York bands at that time. Like you said, it was just a special time. Like you said, it really
Yeah.
was, and speaking of, this album cover behind me, Blitzspeer Live, that was recorded at my favorite club ever, the Limelight. I mean, Purgation, Rock and Roll Church. That still to this day is just to me the best club ever, with all the different rooms. It was like a maze. You get lost, right?
What wasn't to love about it?
Ah, it's amazing.
You're playing rock and roll, and there's hot chicks dancing in cages. There's all these, you had all this decadent rock and roll stuff going on, and you're seeing people coming and going. You had all different types in there, and a church.
In a church.
In a church, you're looking up playing on stage, and there's stained glass everywhere. It's like, wow, this is beautiful.
It was like you said, it was just all those different rooms, and they all had a different feel, a different maybe sound of music in it with a different DJ, or you had that spot in the back on the top with all the couches back there. I mean, it was just a amazing place. I to this day I've never been to a club like that in my life.
Yeah, beautiful club, great time.
Yeah.
And the girl who used to book the Sunday nights, Pamela Brett, she was really nice, man, and she gave us a good shot. Limelight, when we wanted to do it live, and Mike Schnapp and Frankie LaRocca at Epic, they gave us a shot, and we were having a good time. We were having fun, man. It was a real special time in my life.
Yeah. Now you talked about before, you joined one of the more old-time classic New York City bands. And you don't have to be a fan of New York hardcore to like this band. And that's obviously with Murphy's Law and Jimmy Gestapo. I mean, I could do a whole episode here about hardcore. I mean, that would be another, unfortunately, this is a hard rock show, so I don't want to get too much into the hardcore, which, like I said, I'm a huge hardcore fan, obviously. But, when the interesting thing about your career is, like you said, you haven't really, you've been into so many different scenes and styles. You just weren't just in Magnet and just in a hard rock, heavy rock, sort of stoner rock vein. I mean, obviously with hardcore, you played with Murphy's Law. Most recently, just a handful of years ago, you played. I know you at least helped and wrote music for the Blood Clot record. Came out, which is a great record. You've obviously been a producer for Hatebreed, with all their stuff, over the years. And a lot of artists, they'll usually say it's, they're sort of reinventing themselves, or they're, something like that. I mean, do you look at it that way in your career with all the work you've done and been involved with? Were you sort of, quote unquote, reinventing yourself as a musician when you went from, say, Shrapnel to Blitzspeer to Murphy's Law to Monster Magnet, or was you're just someone who liked all different genres and you just didn't care about it? I
didn't really care about that stuff. I just always gravitated towards what I liked. And what I liked always had the core elements, of like the Stooges, Motorhead, like in all the bands I was ever really attracted to, all had those core elements, whether it was punk rock, hardcore, hard rock, alternative. No matter, I never liked putting a label on things, because to me, in my world, hardcore was an exact extension in lineage to bands like the Ramones, right? And the Bad Brains. I remember the Bad Brains. I remember seeing them one of the first times they played in New York, and there's all these things just lined up for me. Like when I got involved with Hatebreed, I got a call from Matt Hyde, who produced Power Trip, who's coming out west and coming out east from the West Coast to work on this record. Have I ever heard of Hatebreed? Yes, I saw them open up for this other band. And it just all kind of started, to me, things just started falling. They always fell into place. And all of it had to do with timing. And I never was like trying to reinvent anything other than like, I'm a fan. I'm a fan of music. Like at the end of the day, I'm still a fan.
Yeah, which is cool. Yeah, without all the subgenre nonsense or whatever. Rock is so many different, so many different types of sounds. But that's really cool that you were able to, like I said, kind of dip your toes and be a part of all these different,
and with
little scenes.
With the Murphy's Law thing, Blitzspear kind of hit the wall. I get a call from Todd. Hey, Jimmy wants to talk to you, and I didn't know what it was about. And I was just like, I figured, like, I don't know what it's about. So hey, we're going to be hanging out in the park. Come on down. I go down and said, hey, we need a bass player for this tour. Do you want to go? I'm like, when are you leaving? They're like, oh, we're leaving in 2 weeks. I'm like, okay. Let me get a passport. You know what I mean? And like, it was really fun. It was always like, then we did a warm-up show at the Wetlands, another club that flies radar,
place,
and that people don't talk about enough. And like, boom, I was on a plane going to France with Murphy's Law, like staying on a squat. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
So things always kind of like fell into place, and then you lead up to Monster Magnet, and you lead up to me doing this record. It's always been a lot of I always just kept grinding away, like
Mhm.
doing my thing. It's always been okay for me.
Yeah. Well, and I've heard, touring with Murphy's Law. I mean, that must have been one hell of a time because I've heard nothing but just. I mean, what a great time that band would have on the road. Just in general, they're always a fun band. I mean, Jimmy would do his St. Patrick's Day shows, obviously in the city, and I mean, but people I've talked to who have played with them, just like there was nothing like touring with Murphy's Law and Jimmy.
Jimmy's a great guy, dude.
Mm.
He's just he's a lot of fun, and at the end of the day, he's just a really good dude. And like that whole, I have such a giant appreciation and spot in my heart for that time period because they're the first guys I went to Europe with.
Okay.
And it's a big part of what I ended up doing later. And at the time, I was just filling in for a while. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
I was just having like fill on some space, and then I had a good time doing it. And then, it was like, and then that led me to like going to LA, and then LA, living in Los Angeles, led me back to New Jersey, joining Monster Magnet, which all these, 25 years later, putting out a solo record, like it's all like back to what when you're mentioning, like, what this record sounds like, it's like all of it, like I you look behind me in my studio here, I got guitars everywhere and amps everywhere. And I went back to like, what would it be like in my head to still be that teenager who got their first guitar, got their first fuzz pedal, got their first amp, and just used that one thing on the record. Because working in production, we've gotten far away. I'll use this guitar for this part, that guitar for that, but blah, 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 like all these different things. I just wanted to like pull everything back into my original influences, and that was really special to me to do that.
Yeah. No, absolutely, man. Well, I want to talk about you've mentioned his name now a couple of times. The late great Todd Youth. As you've been talking about, obviously you and Todd have worked together in many different projects. Todd obviously was a huge New York hardcore figure. He was there from the start in the early days, A7, all of that. Such an underrated and underappreciated guitarist. I mean, every project he did, and he did a lot, was really, really solid. I mean, obviously, regardless of the hardcore with Murphy's Law and Warzone and everything, I mean, what he did, obviously he played in Danzig, played on one of their records, toured with them. He was even, I know, he was supposed to get an audition for the Foo Fighters. I know he turned that down because he joined Danzig. He played with Ace Frehley for years in his band. Cheap Trick record, played with Glenn Campbell. I mean, just an amazing guitarist. But he's also, I want to point out some of the records that or bands projects he played with or played on that no one really talks about. Some people don't even know. The first, record that stands out to me that he did was Chrome Locust. Huge fan of that record. I mean, and to our listeners and viewers and listeners out there that love stoner heavy rock stuff, that you got to go check that out. Chrome Locust, great record.
Fantastic record, and you mentioned it, like, well, Todd and I were friends. Again, it goes back to friendship, right? So, there's only one guitar player who can say they played an agnostic front in Glenn Campbell.
Yeah,
like, how
I
far
know.
away can you?
Unbelievable.
How far?
I know.
But at the same time, it makes sense to me because, Todd lived with me for a while in New York. And when I was driving a cab, it was after those Blitzspeer days and around the time I was playing in Murphy's, and I would come home from driving a cab for hours and hours, and Todd would be on my couch with a guitar, like with a needle on a record, just learning guitar parts of songs that I had no idea he wanted to learn. And he could really fucking play. And he was a musical encyclopedia. And he was just like styles. He could like shift gears like that. He could just shift gears. And, it was when Todd approached me to do the Capricorn thing. It was just like a little fun thing. I'm like, yeah, let's do a couple songs and put it out, like, yeah,
Mm.
why not, And another thing, when Todd played in that couple week period with Motorhead, that was one of his most, we loved, that was our love for Motorhead thing, but like that was a real special time for him. And the Glenn Campbell thing was really special because I remember being in LA and we would visit each other in different when we were making Monolithic. The Magnet was making Monolithic. Todd would come by the studio and see me, and I go and over and see him, and he was working with this producer, and that was around the time of the Cheap Trick stuff as well. He was becoming this session cat, man, and he was like, I was like, wow, man, I'm really happy to see him really branching out and doing his thing. But like, there was another band he had that I don't know if a lot of people know about, was the Home Wreckers. And that was another great thing that I always wish the Home Wrecker stuff came out. And that was right around the time of the Chrome Locust stuff. But Chrome Locust, it's funny, we saw in Europe, we saw the bass player, Jim Hannigan, and I did a little record. I did this recording on it was like some Motorhead tribute thing that Todd did with Des Cadena on vocals and Todd, and it was like Jim and Mikey, and like it was like crazy that the musical influences, all the different paths he went down.
Yeah,
yeah,
all over the place.
Special dude, man. Special. I miss Todd a lot because the one song on this record that dates back to the my time with Todd and writing with Todd. I didn't write this with Todd. I wrote it myself, but we were talking about doing doing another Capricorn release, and he was out here and he was playing with Jesse Malin at the time. And then we were doing the Motorhead tribute thing at Jesse's spot. And I go, Todd, I got a song I want to play for you. It's like, and I played him the song Heroes. And he was like, wow, that's really good. We should record that, And we never got around to doing it. And I was like, you know what? I got to put this song on this record.
Cool,
and,
nice.
You know what I mean? Because he loved it. And he was like, wow, I can't wait to dig into that track. And it never happened. So I was able to dig into it for him, and he's like,
cool.
I missed the dude a lot. It's funny as fuck. A lot of great times. A lot of great times.
Nice. Well, it's funny. Once he passed, I remember sitting here and like probably about a week or so after he passed, I had this record from like around 93 or so. Yeah, this was about 93, 94. And I never knew really who was in the band. And I remember I hadn't heard it in a while. And I was listening to it. I was like, what was this band about? It's a pretty cool record. It was an alternative sort of metal band that was called Larva.
Yeah.
And I'm looking and I'm like, holy shit, it's Todd Youth. I mean, he was the guy. It was unbelievable. Another band with a cool record. I mean, not really much happened with that band. I remember just having it because it was on that Energy Records, and I forget how I got it or whatever. But another band that this guy was, I mean, it's like he was in so much stuff. He's just such a unique, underappreciated guitarist that I wish more would dig into, because like you said, he's just got such a catalog of great music.
Yeah, I remember him calling me up and be, hey, come on, I'm mixing this song with this guy. Can you come by? I need your ears on it. And it was a Larva. It was Larva.
Yeah, it's unbelievable.
And we go back to we were young, man, when we met, and like, and there was a lot of special dudes around that time period, and Todd was a link, and Todd had that lineage, where he went from the hardcore stuff and playing with Ace. And I remember like him showing me Kiss songs. I remember playing guitar with Todd, and then we were playing Kiss riffs. He's like, Phil, it doesn't go like that. It goes like this. That's how Ace does it. And I was like, oh my God, I never would have thought that. I always learned it another way in my head,
Yeah. No, totally, man. Yeah. So now we'll switch up back to just Monster Magnet real quick. Now, as a guitarist, from Monster Magnet, you guys have 3 guitarists in the band. Talk a little bit about how that works with, when it comes to the playing or songwriting. I mean, is having the 3rd guitarist, is that more for Dave in terms of the live perspective of it, or I just curious, when bands have 3 guitarists, how it sort of works, or who does what, whose roles are what. I mean, whatever you can divulge to us.
Well,
about that.
So, I want to give Dave more credit than he ever gets as a guitar player.
Okay.
Right. So when Dave writes the songs for Magnet, he plays, he does his demos. He brings them to me. We sit around and bounce ideas, and we talk about what he is envisioning for the songs to sound like. It's all in his head. My kind of job is to get that and make it a little more cohesive, to how it's going to evolve. But that core is still there. He's a fantastic rhythm guitar player. Nobody plays all those garage rock leads are Dave,
Okay.
And then sonically, the space rock stuff, I never met anybody who can manipulate a delay like Dave Wyndorf. He just does a certain thing. Then he comes to me. Then I put all my sloppy stuff on it. I get my Ron Ashton kick going on, and I get all that happening. And then now with Garrett's so good.
Oh yeah,
such a fucking good guitar player. It's like ridiculous. I don't know how he does it, and it kind of all starts working. It all it's just kind of like, okay, we're making a good pot of stew here, and all the ingredients just fucking work. And if any one guy wasn't involved, it wouldn't come out the same way. So
Sure.
we all play off of each other to a point, and we all add what we add. And I think also too, one of the main things is knowing when to subtract.
Okay.
Not just adding everything, because it can stomp all over, giving each guy a little bit more room to let what they do shine, and then Dave and I put a lot of thought into it. Like when we start to develop his songs and take them to the next level of like, what are the bass parts going to be, and like to try to keep the core of those little original demos is really, really important for Magnet, because that's the kind of artist he is. Wyndorf writes where he's at that particular time. You know what I mean? Like going back to Power Trip, when we were like doing God Says No, we're like, the next Power Trip. Well, that is like, well, he already did Power Trip. He's not going to write Power Trip again. He did it.
Sure.
That's why I love Dave so much, is that like all of his influences really do come out. There's always that garage rock element, and there's always like a Grand Funk Railroad MC5 kind of element. And then there's also that British Hawkwindy kind of element that only he can do. There's a lot of guys have tried, but like, I don't say that because he's like one of my best friends in my whole life. Like, I respect his talent so much, and working with him in this. I remember being in the studio with producers, and Dave and I will go in and we'll start fucking around to be like, you can't do that. We're like, why? Like, it won't record well, it won't do that. We're like, no. This is how we do it. I remember one time I was playing guitar and I was trying to like, I thought it was too sloppy, and the guy's trying to get me to play tighter and this and that. And Wyndorf walks in, it's like, just let Phil be Phil, man. Like, let him do what he fucking does. Leave him the fuck alone, like that's how we work. And we know when to be super serious, and we know when to fuck off. And I think that's what makes it work after all these years.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and the fact that you guys, like I said, I mean, you played together as teenagers at Shrapnel, I mean, and just, I would say, was Shrapnel, was he, the main songwriter for that as well, for Shrapnel? Was that a bit of a mix?
At that time, from what I remember at that time, the band, well, Dave was the singer, so he was writing a lot of lyrics.
Okay.
Dave was writing a lot of lyrics, and he had just started playing guitar a little bit in Shrapnel, and he would come up with a riff here and there, but it's really Daniel.
Okay.
Daniel Ray, myself, it was Daniel, myself, and the other guitar player who passed, David Vogt. But it was very collaborative. But Dave was more like, he wrote the songs, but more the lyricist and like leading the way. You know what I mean? And Dave had these visions, like, I always said, Dave is like lives in a comic book story. It's fucking fantastic. It's like, it's been such a pleasure to be around. And like, hey, look, as far as anything goes with all that, I know we're bouncing around all over the place with the Shrapnel stuff. What other band can say they were in an issue with Spider-Man? Nobody.
Wow. Yeah. Right.
Like,
true. Good point. Yeah.
And so, it's one of those things where that was our beginnings. And then we went our separate ways, and Dave started to play guitar more with that early. I remember hearing all the early Magnet stuff. That was around the time I went on to do Blitzspeer, and Daniel was doing the production stuff with Slab and Circus and the bands up there. And, you know, so it all kind of, we all started to evolve musically in the road. Like one of the things about Magnet that I don't think that we get enough credit for is the garage rock elements of it.
Yeah, I know what you mean. True.
You know, everyone, it's like, oh, you know, you get to the British, the Hawkwindy and the Sabbathy, and then the this, that, and all the other British stuff that we're involved with. But when you really get into it, there's a garage rock mentality to Dave, Dave psyche that has never left. And that goes back to that childlike guitar playing, the spastic rhythm guitars, the lead guitar parts. Then you throw in the Stooges. You know, the Stooges to me is the ultimate of like that with the first Stooges.
Oh yeah, first Stooges. Yeah.
So there's all that stuff, which, you know, I like, again, when we were talking earlier about like my stuff, is that it's always who I've been. So why change it now? You know, why change it now is how I play guitar. That's what I do. Like if you ask me to play, hey, I have this part, I want you to play on this. Well, call a session, dude. You know, I'll give you, if you want what I do, I can do that. Like, you know, I remember when I was doing stuff with Todd, you know, he wanted a certain thing out of me and I couldn't really do it because I'm not that kind of player, you know, and I would play, you know, the bass stuff. I play bass a certain way. I play guitar a certain way. It's hard for me. Like I've never been, I've played original music my whole life. I've never been, I can fudge through a couple New York Dolls riffs and some Johnny Thunders riffs and a couple Ramones things. I can play a Sabbath thing halfway, like when Magnet did Into the Void. Dave and I going like, well, we can't do it as all, you know, let's just do a version that sounds like Suicide. You know what I mean?
Okay, yeah.
Let's fucking go crazy. You know, let's do what we do. And that's how that came out. So it's always been who I am, you know?
Yeah, what you guys did, obviously, you said the last record you put out, the covers record, the cover you did of Learning to Die by Dust. I mean, that was, you guys did a really bang up job because that's not an easy band to cover either, you know?
Yeah, that goes back. So that goes back to like, you know, Dave and I, when we first met, we were listening to Dust. We were listening to all those bands and he wanted to do that. And I was like, fuck yeah. And there was even parts of that. I mean, I can't play that. Garrett, get over here. You know? Garrett and Alec, thank God you guys are here because I can't really do that. You know,
that's tough, man. It ain't easy.
But like, you know, it's a lot of fun. We have a lot of fun. We have a lot of fun making records. Making records should be fun. It shouldn't be a chore. You know, it shouldn't be like I hear how some of these bands get. I'm like, well, I'm glad I'm not like that. There's no way I could do that. I'd rather pump fucking gas, you know?
Yeah. It's a good point. No, you got to have fun. Exactly. It's art. And it's, yeah, I guess if, you know, when you create an art, if you got that pressure to do something that's not you, it's not going to come out. It's not going to sound right. It won't come out that great. So,
yeah,
like I said, yeah.
And all the core elements of who that, like with my stuff, that's who I am. You know, that's what I like about what I had a lot of that I've had fun with the solo record. You know what I mean? I've had a lot of fun with it, you know, and that's kind of like I'm happy at this point in my career. I'm happy I didn't do something earlier. You know, I might have done something different and been like, what is Phil thinking? You know what I mean? I'm happy that it evolved to a point to go back to my roots, to do my own record and to let it be raw enough. And, you know, I hate the labels and things, but like, let it be authentic enough of who I am and what I wanted to do.
Yeah. Well, speaking of labels, you know, I mean, what's your take on the stoner rock label? You know, considering the fact that obviously Monster Magnet is considered probably one of the top 3 godfathers, you know, along with maybe like Caius and Fu Manchu. They're obviously the godfathers of the East Coast, the stoner rock. But obviously, you know, a lot of musicians I talk to are just like, man, they hate that label. You know, I mean, the only people I probably don't mind is if you know, you do smoke weed or something. But even people who do, it's like, yeah, it's just, to them it takes sort of away from really what the music's about when you call it stoner rock. I like to refer to it just as heavy rock. It's
Yeah.
just rock a little bit heavy. So I mean, what's your take on the whole stoner rock?
I never liked the label.
Yeah.
I never liked the
Mm.
label because the stuff that the three bands that you mentioned that kind of pioneered it, being like Magnet, Caius, and Fu Manchu, and there's a few others.
Mhm.
I think each of those bands were listening to the stuff that influenced them, which was hard rock, which was psychedelia, which was like, back then we would dig for records, like you mentioned in Jax, like dig for records, like a band like Jerusalem, a band like, Granicus, is early Grand Funk Railroad stoner rock, is mountain stoner rock. There's
Yeah.
more common bands. So, you look at Leslie West play guitar from the mountain. Felix Pappalardi's bass is all fucking fuzzed out. Is Hendrix stoner rock? You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's a good point.
And so for us, maybe at some points of our lives, we were getting stoned, finding music, but like the label of stoner rock never really quite appealed to myself. And I know that I'd never like speaking for Dave because Dave is his own person, but I can tell you he's not a big fan of that label as well. More like with what you're saying, with our influences.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's because it's this sound is becoming obviously bigger and bigger now. I mean, it's really having a resurgence, this heavy rock sound. So when you start hearing stoner rock, it's just, like I said, talking to some musicians that have been in the game for a long time, been doing this for decades, just seem to really don't want to embrace it. And I totally agree. I think it's a bad label.
Like, what is punk rock?
Yeah, that's true. The name punk, exactly. Yeah,
look, like punk rock has become so mainstream after the label being around for so long. I remember when like you had punk rock elements finally in some major label stuff. It was like, well, it's been done.
Yeah.
Like, what is punk rock? Punk rock to me is Charlie Parker and like those old jazz guys have to get in a car and go into the back door of a club where they weren't accepted because of the color of their skin, but having to do what they had to fucking do because the music was in them. You know what I mean? And then early Miles Davis, like that to me is punk rock, like with what we were doing, we're just kids fucking picking up guitars and didn't know how to play.
Yeah.
And that's
true.
And then you look at guys like, the originators of from what I understand from being a fan is like, the band Suicide, who there was not one guitar, and that was like just loud, aggressive, screaming, and and a lot going on to sign Alan Vega, and then all like, what is punk rock? To me, those labels, I think, pull us away of how good the elements of certain music really are.
Yeah, it tends to sometimes pigeonhole, bands, even though they don't really belong in a certain, label group, whatever you want to call it. Unfortunately, I mean, obviously it's been I think a problem for decades within music is just the subgenreification of everything, trying to put this here and this here. Obviously, it's all a branding, marketing thing.
Yeah, labels. The major labels want to sell stuff, right?
Exactly.
So they want to they want a tag, right? They want the next thing. They want the next gimmick, right?
Yep.
Whereas like one of the things that I am really, really happy about, like people will ask me, like, Phil, is like, what do you think of music today? I'm like, well, again, I go back to like what I like. I think it's great seeing young artists like being able to make music on their phones and laptops. I would have done the same freaking thing.
Oh yeah.
I think it's fucking fantastic. I think it's great. I think it's great when subculture becomes culture, and then like it's all an evolvement of a natural involvement. Now, some things like when it's like anything, it's when something becomes marketable, then it's a sellout, and it's a sellout. Everybody's got their fucking opinion. It's like, I'm the kind of person, I just want to leave it alone. Like there's some artists I like that people wouldn't even think that I like, but like I think it's cool that like tomorrow Bob and I are going to go record my nephew and his band. He's 17 years old. He wants to play guitar and make a song.
Nice.
So well,
Hmm.
great. So we can bring a couple of kids in a studio and record them. You know what I mean? So it's like
That's
there's
great.
still young people out there who are influenced by things in their life that they need to make music, and that's what's important.
Yeah, I agree 100% with you, man. Bingo, nailed it. So, what's the plan for the record now, Phil? I mean, for the new record, I mean, are you for the solo record? Are you just gonna kind of, you plan on maybe playing a show in Jersey
Well,
or something, or
like
you know?
after, at the beginning of it, I just wanted to do a record, and with Wendigo Productions, and that's actually my old friend Raphael from the Cycle Sluts.
Oh, okay, cool.
Got a with a couple of bucks, and like I'm just gonna. It was just a talk of it was just to do a record, and how I got involved with them was through Scotty from Blitzspeer's band 10 Ton Mojo. About like I did some production with them, and and so originally it was like, okay, we're just gonna do this thing, and now because it's evolved, hopefully we can get out there and get a little combo together and do some things that make sense. If it
Yeah.
makes sense, I'll get out there and play. I want to do it, and get this record out there, get it played, and get the word out there that it's actually real. That's why it was very important to me on the last tour to actually have some vinyl over at Jack's and bring the vinyl over with me to Europe to let people know, yeah, I really did this. This does exist now.
Mm,
And we will evaluate at the time when it's time to go play it. Let
mm.
me do I got a couple of things that I'm doing with Dave, and I've talked to Wyndorf. Has called me last week. Hey, you're gonna go out and play this thing, right? And I'm like, he's pushing me to do it.
Oh, nice. Okay.
I'm pushing myself to do it. So yeah, there's going to be some shows down the road.
Oh, very cool, very cool. So, I mean, is this something you could see yourself just kind of doing on the side now, going forward? Now that you've got the first record out, could you see yourself maybe putting one out down the road when you got some more downtime from Magnet or
Yeah, yeah.
something? Yeah.
I'm at this point because I have my own studio.
Hmm.
I have the ability to make music. I've done the one. I have a couple of projects that I'm going to be working on right now to finish up that I've gotten involved with some production stuff. I'm always the kind of person, like, once I get all those creative things happening, that I will write some more stuff, and who knows where that's going to go. But yeah, I'll record some more stuff.
Very cool, very cool. Now, in terms of also now with Monster Magnet, playing live, you guys are slated to be playing Desertfest New York, September 15th. I know you guys unfortunately were forced to miss that last year because of an injury to Dave, but and you just wrapped up 14 date, mostly a German European tour earlier in the month. So I mean, fill us in on what's going on, I guess, currently with Monster Magnet, with everything that's going on in that camp. Any other future dates you guys got lined
Yeah.
up after?
So the European tour was really, really great for us after, with everything that went on with Dave. It's almost like it 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 felt right, this year, and everything lined up really well for this summer to do the festivals and the headlining tour. For me personally, having this record out, um, and then the Desert Fest coming up next month, and wind out the year with our next plan for early next year, which would be some more shows getting out there. There's some talk about some recording some stuff, and we'll see what happens once we get past the Desert Fest thing. And like fall has always been a really great time to collaborate and talk with Dave of where he wants to go with things. And I see some things on the horizon for us.
Oh, very cool, man. Well, once again, the album is Caivano. It's a debut solo release from Monster Magnet guitarist Phil Caivano. And Phil, where should we send the viewers and listeners to go check out the album, purchase it, and keep up with
Okay,
what you got going on?
so it's available on all streaming platforms: Spotify, Apple Music. There's some that I don't even, I just got glued to. Let me see. It's on Amazon Music, Apple Music, Deezer, Spotify, Tidal, Amazon. It's for purchase, download on Amazon, and the vinyl is available through Downright Merch.
Okay, downright merch.
Yep.
Okay.
And I could, if you want to send me your email, I could send you the link to that. That's actually downrightmerch.com.
Okay, very cool. Yeah, we'll include that in the post when this comes up later in the week, so that people can go purchase that. So we've been encouraging viewers and listeners to buy the music. You know what I mean? We would buy the vinyl, buy the CD, whatever it is. It's the best way to support an artist. Not so much through Spotify if you don't have.
Oh yeah, the way the way to support it is to purchase. That's one thing that to me in my brain and my old brain is that it's about a product, not something that comes through the air. You know what I mean? And
I agree.
And it's about a product. And if you like what your favorite artists do, I'm not saying me in specific. I'm saying if you like what you're hearing and you like what you do from somebody, I'm a big believer to purchase. Go to that merch booth. Pick up something, whether it's if you don't have the money for a shirt, buy a sticker. If you don't have money for a sticker, buy a pin. Support independent music because we are the ones who are keeping it going.
Absolutely.
Independent music is really what's happening in the world today. It's like, and when you see the price of some of these concert tickets, I'm just like, I can't afford to do it. But it's not about that. It's about the real stuff is the independent underground artists. We're always the ones who support one another. Going back to what you asked about, those New York days, we were all at everyone's shows. And I feel really special that I'm still able to do this. I'm in a great band. Some people gave me a great opportunity to put this record out. I hope people like it. And I hope when they hear it, if they hear it streamed, they're driven to support it so I can do it again, and that it's a real product. That product that you're like, I can't thank Third Man Pressing enough. I went with Third Man on this. I love Jack White, and I love his the whole Detroit thing. I was really, really happy and proud that I didn't go the route of having this manufactured elsewhere other than Detroit, Michigan. And Bill Skibby, who mastered this record, he works with Third Man, and he gave me the contacts to get this pressed here. And I feel that we made the best product that I could to keeping it simple, the printing, the pressing. It's a quality product, and I was all about keeping it that way because I didn't want it to be like, I didn't want it to be like like when you get this record, you get it in your hands, the different color choices that I made. The model feels good, the cover feels quality, the inner sleeve, everything about it is so part of me that I want the fan of Phil Caivano to have the quality that I envisioned it to be.
Yeah, when they get the experience, that's the whole point. The part of it is that's missing. I think, when you come to streaming everything, is that experience of holding that vinyl in your hand and reading the liner notes and just, you're having, like you said, that physical product. It just resonates more. It sticks to you more than if you just kind of pop on the song, like you said, out of thin air, and that's it. There's nothing else attached to it, so
and even and I took it upon myself to knowing that it was going to be streamable and downloadable, that even if you don't have a turntable, it's a nice piece of art. You know what I mean? It's a nice quality piece of art that you can put on the shelf, you can hold it in your hand, and you can feel it. And that's the kind of person I am. I like quality.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Fantastic. Well, once again, Caivano is the name of the record. Phil Caivano, and thanks, Phil, so much for coming on and joining me here on the Heavy Galaxy show.
Oh, great show, man! A lot of great stuff here, man. Really, really good. Really,
thanks, man. Appreciate it. Thanks a lot, Phil.
unfold.